think last episode was 81 in one of your hotel rooms, Joern. You know which hotel?
Yeah, it was the Marriott in Berlin.
So
now we're not in a hotel.
No.
Now we're in your cozy little office in Berlin.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you for having us here.
Absolutely. Happy you guys can make it. I know it's been a long trip, but let's see.
Yeah. How's life, Joern?
You know, has many different phases.
Ups and downs, rights and lefts.
Some things are good. Other things are not so good. But yeah, generally we're in good spirits and, we're enjoying our time, still trying to do the best we can. And, yeah.
What's your favorite thing you're working on right now?
My tan.
Your tan. No, your tan lines.
No. We have a number of things going on, and all of them are actually quite special, I have to say, because all of them are things that we haven't really previously done like this. So we're working on a bank right now. So that's
cool.
a
bunch of new stuff. So
yeah, that's a bunch of really new stuff. Very interesting. We're working on a long stay concept, which is also new for us. And we're working in some regions that we haven't worked in before in Germany, which is also interesting. So everything's new right now. So everything is, quite
so it feels
exciting.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You have to learn new dialects as well, or
no
for the region?
No, I don't do dialects.
That's a challenge. Learning new dialects.
Yeah. No, we're not doing that.
No. Okay. But new regions, but no, not new countries for you.
Oh, not new countries. No.
So talking about hotels, because just mentioned working for a bank, it's completely different, or are there any similar?
No, it's different. I mean, they have different requirements, have different ways of decision making, different also different ways of looking at things, really. Some things sound very similar in the beginning, but they turn out not to be. Other things sound very similar, but turn out to be very similar, just have a different name. So, it's very interesting. They also have quite involved processes, with their employees, which is very different from most hotel projects, even though everybody right now is, very eager to point out, how much they appreciate their employees and how much they do for them, and give them badges for all types of things, which is great. But with the bank people, I mean, they're really concerned about their employees. You know what I mean? So they, go all out, making sure their work environments are just so, and every possible norm and whatever else is adhered to, and they're very much participating in the process of decision making, which is a little bit challenging from our end, but quite interesting to observe.
But before we go on talking about hotels, how do you approach a bank nowadays? Because, I mean, bank subsidiaries, aren't they actually closing?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't, really keep track of that type of thing, but I think there's different banks that probably have different approaches to, what they feel their strength is in terms of the customers that they're serving. I'm sure there are a lot of banks that are actually closing branches.
Yeah, like a bank concept is not a bank anymore as we know.
Right, because they want to cut down on costs and, all these types of things, and all trying to go digital. But I think, obviously there's other banks, who, see a lot of their business in maintaining, personal relationships with clients. I also think it's a little bit of a question of, location, number one, and also, the type of customer that you're serving, the type of business you're looking to generate. I think it's one thing to have the people run around with an app so they can get money, most conveniently. It's a different, customer community that you're serving when you're, handing out loans, like business loans. And if that's core to your business, I think it makes a lot of sense to, bring the people back into a building.
They started
environment.
like creating the bank lobby like a coffee house
exactly.
Yeah.
So all of that is part of what we're doing there, and like I said, it's very interesting. It's a super
different approach.
It's a super pretty building and very engaged people, on the client side. So it really is quite interesting. Yep.
So coming back to the hospitality industry, what's up in the
I don't know. You
hotels
tell me,
market?
I've been trying to figure that out.
on your side.
On our side, right? I mean, look, it's. I don't need to tell anyone. It's the times have changed. Business has evolved, and conditions have generally not improved. In the real estate sort of industry overall, and specifically in the hotel industry as well. One of the most telling things that I have observed recently is that everybody's reporting revenue, nobody's reporting profit. Mm-hmm. So, everybody's making more money, but on the revenue side, but it doesn't stick because the costs are obviously increasing much faster and higher than the revenues do. And obviously, in the long term, that's a problem, right? And of course, I think like most people, you see this in the projects. You see it in what's happening in how long decisions are taking. You see it in the fact that sooner or later, most projects run into some sort of financial shenanigans. And there's some sorting out that needs to happen. And oftentimes that means, there's going to be programming changes, or there's going to be quality changes, or sometimes there's operator changes. And that kind of thing is what happens on a day-to-day basis right now, and that didn't really used to be the case like that. So that's the environment we're in right now. And, keeps it interesting. But, every now and then also quite challenging.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you're observing these changes after the pandemic, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's that whether it's strictly related to the pandemic, I'm sure it is somewhere, but I'm not enough of a sort of financial whiz that I can kind of really, draw a straight line from A to B to C. But I mean, you don't need to be a magician to sort of see the connections, right? I mean, if there's no real estate deals, nothing's being sold or bought. There's not going to be any sizable new projects. Nothing's being built because nobody gets a loan for it. Yeah. So, all of those things mean there's going to be less projects, and yes, and the projects that exist are mainly, sort of refurbishment projects where people really need to do something or where they can capitalize on events that are on the horizon. As we all know, everything has become very much event driven, be it concerts or be it major sports events or, what have you. That's really providing the big impact in most markets. Just take the incredible, summer of entertainment in Munich that's just sort of wrapped up. I mean, these people just went from strength to strength to strength, right? Because they had incredible entertainers come and fill all these, concert halls, but they've also discovered—
They even built concert halls, huh?
Yeah, but they've also discovered that the type of customer guest who comes, they don't spend quite the same way, obviously, than, the people who come to spend vacation.
What would have revenue been without Adele in Munich?
Well, I mean, nobody knows, right? But I mean, I don't even know how much money they actually make. There's projections. But the point is that the nature of the projects that are currently out there have changed, mainly, again, to, refurbishments or reflags, where one operator takes over from the other because everybody's after growth. And so that's what's out there right now. And increasingly these things happen very quickly. So you have one day you look at a particular property and it's has name X, and a week later you look at it, has name Y on it, and all of a sudden you start realizing, well, I guess the difference between those two brands wasn't actually that big, was it?
Yeah.
Still the same property, right? So yeah, that's the nature of business right now.
But have like the rules and categories changed? For example, one of your favorite topics, sustainability rules, or like categories referring to quality and costs and etc.
I mean, I don't know that they've really changed. I would say that on the subject of sustainability, I mean, I think you were part of that conversation actually that we
yes,
had
that's right.
not too long ago, and yeah, I mean, our experience with that is that everybody wants it, nobody wants to pay for it. That's and that's at least in our experience, that's the case everywhere, basically. So is anyone really going to go out and make major changes to a project to accommodate this or that ESG requirement? Not so much.
But is that a local issue? Or is it a like Central European issue, or is it an international issue?
I don't know. I mean, I would venture to say it's an international issue. I don't really have the data to sort of back that up. That's just anecdotally. But the thing is that everybody knows, like in Europe, these requirements are going to come down the line, and it's going to at some point cause problems. People know that. There's rules, financial rules and ESG related rules that are going to come down the pipeline, and they're going to bite at some point. And for financing, and you're going to have to meet those goals. But even though everybody right now is still trying to get away without complying, because it's raising costs right now. And right now, the name of the game is, how can I get the best for the least? That's true for pretty much everything. That's not only true for, ESG related items, but, anything really, be it FF&E, be it, MEP improvements or whatever, what have you, it's the same everywhere, basically.
So in the end, the quality is not the same as before. Or?
No, I don't think it is. I mean, I think you see a lot of effort on reducing cost. Let's put it that way. The quality that you get for it is not always related to the cost. I mean, let's be clear about that. I mean, we've seen a lot of things happen where there were enormous amounts of money spent on something, and what you ended up getting was a heap of crap, basically. And everybody wondered how that happened. I got a few theories on how that happened, but it's that's maybe a little bit of a different story. But the point is, right now, there's huge efforts to reduce costs to that bare minimum where possible. At the same time, what we see is that a lot of companies, operators, specifically in the hotel environment, they need to sharpen their product because there's such a glut of brands. So everywhere you look, I mean, we had the subject a little bit earlier, but everywhere you look, it's become more difficult to distinguish between brands. Brands of the same operator, major operator, brands of different major operators, because everybody's competing in the same space.
Level.
If you look at it, brand tiers, and you take it across and you look at sort of the major 6-7 operators, you will discover that in each of those tiers, every one of them by now has multiple products, basically, and yes, oftentimes that makes a lot of sense because a specific product will, work better in a specific market, right? But sometimes these products are more or less next door, and you're like, well, I don't know what the difference is. I can tell you. Sometimes I have to go back out and look, whether I went into the right door. You know what I mean? So those two things happen at the same time. So the cost pressure and the pressure to differentiate your brand, and that makes life, pretty difficult. Not not only for us, but also I think for the brand people in specifically, and because they need to find the differentiator. They need to define those things that are actually going to make a difference in the perception of the guest. And increasingly that's very difficult. And we read a lot of brand briefs because we, work for different operators, different brands with different operators. And you do see that, increasingly the language is quite interchangeable. And so when you read these things and you read through different operators, different brands, and you start finding the same semantics and vocabulary, you start wondering, so what's making the difference here?
So it's not the rules or the quality that's been lost or that we're losing.
No,
it's more like the individual creativity or.
No, I think that comes on top of it. Like I said, I think the differentiator conundrum is one thing, is one layer, and another layer is that needs to happen while, you need to save cost, right? And in
something is lost on track there.
In some markets, and this is what we're talking about right now is not something that can be sort of extrapolated around the globe, but I think certainly in this particular market and in most markets in Western Europe, that's the case right now. So what you see as one of the solutions, my opinion, as one of the solutions is that, increasingly the operators basically push soft brands, So the collections, they all have them, right? It's like the handwritten collection, the unbound collection, the luxury collection, the
urban
graph collection, so everybody has these collections, and it makes a lot of sense because it allows the brands to go in and basically bring properties under their umbrella with a decreased demand on for the owners to comply with certain rules. I mean, they still have to comply with certain rules and certain standards, but it's just the set of those rules and standards is smaller. So the process of conversion is much quicker. So there's a quicker access to additional rooms, right? Room growth. And the cost is lower, and the times that are being afforded to these property owners is usually a little bit longer, so the transition is easier for them. So it makes a lot of sense, But at the same time, I think there's obviously also a danger, really, at some point, that you're going to look at these things, especially in that segment, and you say, well, what kind of collection is that now? You know what I mean? And where the people who benefit from this really the most, are people who are part of the loyalty programs of the individual operators, which again also makes sense because obviously everyone is eager to grow that particular group of guests because these are the guests that are most loyal, right? And then and you can cater to best, and probably, I don't know the numbers exactly, but probably have a higher average spend, per property and all of those things, So it does make sense for the operator to focus on that, so and that's what's happening.
So do you think that these hotels will always stay under the umbrella of the collection, or do they will be integrated in the brand portfolio? One day, well, what's the plan behind?
They are integrated in the brand portfolio, but as a collection,
part of the collection.
And I think, they'll stay that way because
what makes it very individual.
Yeah. So they stay individual.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the idea behind. Okay.
Exactly. And I mean, there's a race for that, right? There's a race for individuality, which is also interesting.
Quite nice.
It's nice, but it's also interesting because you do have that dichotomy, that you have the large known brands.
Same as with Starbucks, I think. They also
And at
for
the same
number
time,
two,
you want to project that you offer a lot of sort of individual experiences, and so it's interesting to see how that plays out, and it does actually lend itself to some very, very meaningful and very interesting conversations. So I think also on the operator side, and also obviously sometimes on the owner side, asset management side, there's some interesting, very, very interesting thought processes that have developed, and there's some very, very meaningful conversations about where things are going, and it's no longer a sort of very clear-cut thing oftentimes, where you say, okay, well, this is brand XYZ, let's sit down and do that, even if it's a very, elevated brand with something that has a lot of individuality to it. I think now there's a much more stringent analysis process, relating to each individual property of each individual brand, right? And that, in my mind, that's very interesting, and that really makes it worthwhile engaging in these things right now. It's good.
What do you think about individual hotels that are not part of such a collection? So that stay part of the family, or how do you see the market for them? Or
I like the question.
It's interesting because I think obviously, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, also France, Belgium, Netherlands, there's a huge number of unbranded hotels, gigantic number. And those are the hunting grounds in some ways, for the soft brands, basically. People go around and they discover, properties that are exceptionally well kept, or that, have a very strong concept and very loyal following, and those properties get approached, so I think that's one category. There's another category of places that oftentimes have a very long history. So they've been in particular families, for a long period of time, and they're in some incredibly beautiful settings. I haven't often traveled in Germany. This year I have, and it's taken me some places that I would have never gone if I didn't have a reason to. And you discover these things, and you just by the roadside, you oftentimes you see these places, and you're like, oh, that's very interesting. That could be great. Unfortunately, it's not.
Why?
Well, because the quality. A
lot of times the shell is great and the inside is not great.
Yeah. Also, I think sometimes I think there's obviously it's a lack of funds. It's because oftentimes it really takes a lot of money to especially if they're historic properties, or things that maybe where there's recently been a change in ownership. One generation to the next, the older generation might have just ridden it out to some point, and now you really need to do something. And the younger generation has taken it over, and they're trying, but it's they just don't have the funds for it. But oftentimes I think it's also a little bit of a not understanding fully like what the potential is that is in it. So the people are, I think, oftentimes very much focused on the local market and whatever market has sort of come to them over time. Oftentimes they have a gigantic percentage of repeat guests, like 90 or 95% of guests that come every year, right? And they, to some degree, expect to see what they've seen the last year. And some of these places are really afraid of making changes because they think they're going to alienate a lot of the people that have come to them for many years, so they...
Yeah, but I think they also forget that their guests are maybe turning too old at some point.
They do, but it's still...
So they need to focus on a younger generation
that's
as
true,
guests.
But it's a big step. And we've done properties like this before, where we were very much part of the conversation within the family. How far should we go? How far should we push this? Or can we push this? What is it? What is it that we want to achieve, really? Do we want to have...
and focus communication.
Yeah. Do we want to develop this and become something new? open ourselves up to new customer base.
Not too new.
And some people will, sort of fall on that end. Others, not so much. They're too afraid of it, or they just don't see where their customer base should be coming from. They don't know where to market for it. All of those things. Oftentimes, they also really don't have access to, let's say, the know-how or the skill set or the suppliers or whatever the case might be, so they're stuck, but they're used to also within their locale, sort of, deal with the suppliers that are there. They go to the tile guy, Mr. Schmidt, who he's done the tiles for 50 years, right? They go to the electrician who's always done the electrical work. They go to the lighting, right? Big mistake. And and they go to the local mill worker, who's always done all the closets and all of this stuff, so. But these people, they also, most of the time, not always, but always, most of the time, they also don't have the bandwidth really, or the vision that they will go back to the customer and say, well, listen, why don't you try something new? Because they're oftentimes not exposed to how successful that might be, So I think it's a combination of factors, but I think there is a real, there's a potential for a real moment, because what I think we see is, obviously that went through the press, that there's a coming backlash in major tourist locations, in terms of how many visitors, how many tourists they're willing to accept at a given time, and this might be a little bit overhyped right now, but I think in general this is something that is going
locations.
to happen. Yeah, I think that is something that's going to happen because a set number of places attract an ever-growing number of tourists, right? I mean, there's this thing out there. I don't know exactly what the number is, but it's some gigantic number. Like, if the entire Indian middle class were to start traveling, like we do, or like the European middle class already travels, every place would be overrun every time of the year with like hundreds of thousands, millions of people, and that's just India. There's many other places in Africa and other places that are developing sizable middle classes very quickly. And if all of these people start traveling to the same places that everybody's already been traveling to, those places at some point will say, you know what, that's it, we're done here. You either bring your own water or you're not coming. Right? So so if you just take that as a development, I think there's a likelihood that in the vicinity or further and larger vicinity of these major spots, people will look elsewhere. They will go and they will say, look, the countryside is still very nice. It's not that major spot, but in the countryside. But why don't we, travel around a little bit? And then they discover these places, and that's another thing anyway. That's, I think, a big trend is like people go and discover. They obviously, with the internet and all the information that's available, and all kinds of guides and people who, influencers and so forth that do that for people, they roam the countryside basically and say, oh, look, there's a place over here. Let's go, and then they go in and they check in and they do a 5-minute video, right? And somebody sees it and they're like, that's great. Why have you
I want to go there too.
So all of a sudden, next thing you have 25 buses in front of your door, right? And you're like, oh.
Well, what kind of chain reaction do you want? Right?
No, but so I'm saying that these places, I think, have the ability or the prospect of seeing a lot more business, and also what's happening. I just read an article recently. Hyatt, for example, has decided to decidedly go into sort of second-tier locations, so to not only invest into growing their presence in A spots, but, decidedly go into B spots because they see the same trend, basically, and I think it's only natural once one of the big guys starts, the other ones will, if they're not already doing it and they're just not promoting it that way,
or they're waiting for someone to be the first one, to not be the first one, to not make the mistakes you do as a first one. Because as a second one, you will not do
Yeah.
the same mistakes.
Well,
Yeah.
or they've just been under the radar a little bit, so it's like I said, it's already happened, and you see, places, for example, in Poland, I've spent a little bit of time dealing with Poland, which I find super interesting, and there you see a lot of places that have quite sizable development in from a hotel perspective that at least me outside of the market had really never heard of, and the same to some degree is true in Romania and some other, and the Balkans, also some other places, where these people are just, the beautiful places, they're just building hotels, and I think here a lot of those places have hotels, they're family owned, and these people are faced now increasingly, I think, will be faced with the choice of, do I become part of some network, some collection, or romantic hotels, or organizations like that, or are we doing it independently? But they will see that the market increasingly will be there, and with the market being there, the rationale will change. Now, if with those two things, at some point also the attitude of the banks will change, then I think you might see some real development there, right? Obviously, right now those conditions remain difficult, but yeah, I think that's the interest right now.
Some good stuff is being born in our conversation.
Happy to hear that there's some light at the end of the tunnel.
I think there's a lot of light.
A lot of light.
Light. Another nice topic to talk to you about.
It's just that the tunnel got a lot longer,
Yeah.
You always see the light. It just depends on when you get there.
Absolutely, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Depends on your glasses.
Yeah. And how long you have to travel, you might run into the night before it gets day again, but it's a different story.
Talking about light at the end of the tunnel, I think working with you takes you to the light a lot quicker than a long tunnel. I always say it's the most wonderful dependency there is between interior design and lighting. What's your point of view?
Yeah, no, I mean one does not exist without the other.
Right.
I mean,
that's the most wonderful dependency. That
right. I mean that's a
they only coexist.
Right. That's a fundamental truth, right? And you can shape one with the other. We're a very visually oriented species. So, what light does to how we perceive things is obviously of paramount importance in any spatial context, and also in providing an emotional response to an environment. So those are things that are just as I said, fundamental truths. So dealing with that and giving it, calibrating those two things together so they actually interact and reinforce each other in whichever the environment is that you're looking to define is from my perspective the most critical component of certainly, I mean, spatial design generally, but particularly in the hospitality environment, for sure. Right. And I never tire of saying that. I don't think that adequate attention is paid to that. I mean, it's another one of those subjects where a lot of people think they're, already paying way too much money for it. Why should they be paying more money for it? Again, it's not a question of money. It's predominantly a question of understanding, why you need it and what it is doing for you, and then funneling the adequate sort of funds in that direction, basically, right? But from my perspective and experience, it is, I think I've said that before somewhere. It is, the best investment that you will ever make.
To underline your concept.
Yeah, to underline the concept, but also to sort of, provide longevity.
Human well-being.
Yeah, but also to provide longevity in a lot of ways, because and to that extent, I think that working with these concepts that provide a level of flexibility is important. And I certainly have my approach to this, which I'm not saying is the one that everybody should have, but
no, that's yours. Nobody should have that.
I mean, it's worked in our context, but I think it's worthwhile. A very thorough thought process. What the right approach is in a given scenario, and I think, or I see. We see in the projects that we do or the projects that we know about, that oftentimes that is not the case. It's oftentimes very much a knee-jerk reaction to this way or that way. I think it would be great if that continued to change. It does change, but again, too often you still see these things, and you go into these places, and you're like, "What happened? Why?" Right? And it could have been solved with like the same amount of money. Like again, it's not a question of money. It's just a matter of paying attention at the right time and understanding what that investment might do for you. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So that's lighting, as lighting control. Lighting control is a huge component of this. And also there, it's increasingly sort of a predicament, because the technology is there, and it can work beautifully. The reality is, in many, many, many cases, it does not work beautifully, and there's many, many, many issues.
Yep.
And in many cases, people get very frustrated with this, so what do? They get rid of it, or they reduce it to a minimum because it's complex.
Or don't pay attention at all.
But often, I mean, I see more of people actually being frustrated with the fact that they spend a lot of money on it and it doesn't work the way either they thought it was going to work or that it needs to work.
The way it should.
And oftentimes these things are not a technological question. So they're not a question of, can the system actually do this? They're, a question of, did the people who installed the system understand what it was supposed to do?
Yeah.
And oftentimes they don't,
We experience that a lot. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And then, And so then, us, we end up being in our role, we end up being at a given project site or whatever the case might be, and we start discovering, this doesn't work. This doesn't, these light fixtures or whatever, they're not grouped together the way they're supposed to be grouped together, or they don't dim as they're supposed to dim, because somebody decided to not buy, the specified light bulb. LED retrofit light bulb that happens to dim to like whatever 5% or 1% or whatever it is, because it would have cost 50 cents more. So there's a snowballing effect of these decisions that are being made, where people don't really understand what they're doing, and what they're upending, with their decision, because all of a sudden, because of that 50-cent decision that somebody made way down the line, the $60, $70, $80,000 system or euro system that you installed does not work properly anymore. So it's not the 50 cent, it's the 80,000 you already spent that have now gone down the drain, So, and these things, this interrelationship of like spiraling and snowballing costs and deficiencies, that is very unique, to lighting control or building control, but lighting control in particular, there's a huge amount of frustration out in the market, and when we come to the table and we basically say, look, we need this, must be, and then oftentimes we'll go and maybe recommend a specific manufacturer, for example. the answer that you get is from some installer or some consultant. Don't worry about it. We got this. We understand this. We've been installing these systems for 20 years. All right.
Well, if you hear that, that.
I mean, it's fine. Who might say you don't know what you're doing? I mean, I'll tell them anyway. But the point is,
yeah, you will.
Yeah. So
I've known you long enough to know that.
Because usually they don't. But the point is, you need to be, clear about what the requirements are. What are the features of the system that you need to work later? And once you've given them that, and they'll set out, doing their magic, and then at the end of the day, it doesn't work out, you still have the same problem. It doesn't work out. The problem with these systems is they're so complex, and when they get installed, you have no way of really testing them. You will only find out when the whole thing is done and you're 2 days before opening. Because that's when, a stupid idiot like me jumps around the project site and tries to, do whatever they think they can be doing. And everybody on the client side rightfully expects that these things will be perfect. That's what they're paying me for, right? For example. And all you can do is like run around, shrug your shoulders basically and say, well, you know what? It was supposed to work like this, but it really doesn't. No, you can't postpone your opening, right? And it's difficult to explain to people once they're in the door that chandelier over there was supposed to be lit right now, but unfortunately it's not. Or that piece of art over there, unfortunately cannot be lit because the group of fixtures over there, whatever, cannot be aimed properly, or whatever the case might be, because they didn't coordinate properly with the drywall. And there's so many things about this where the people, when they're doing it, don't have a clear understanding what is critical and important about the installation, both on the actual physical hardware installation as well as the software or the programming bit of the installation. And you cannot, like I said, easily verify these things until the moment that they're actually needed and it's showtime. And that has a lot to do with, how projects work and how they progress, and the fact that, every project site will have work being done in it almost until the last minute, which is just the way it is. A furniture being delivered, walls still being painted, all kinds of stuff, right? And from a final lighting setup, that is the last thing that will happen. The very last thing that will happen, like all the artwork needs to be installed. All the accessories need to be in place. I need to know where every piece of whatever equipment is, and how it's being handled there. Is there going to be a lit screen to the POS or not? All of those things need to be there and in place, so you can do your final setup. And that moment just does not arrive, until 5 minutes before the doors fly open. Mm-hmm. Right. And so we try to tell our clients, look, you need to allocate, appropriate amounts of time, for this to happen, so we need certain things in place, and we need to do this in waves. We need to go in and do sort of a rough focus, and to the extent that is possible, see that the system works. We don't need to program, but we need to see that the system works. And you, client, please need to make sure that your contractor understands that, and they need to allocate the personnel and the time to do this.
Well, and additionally, the usability should be easy.
Yeah, I mean that's
the staff and the guests.
That's yet another layer that's also problematic. But yes, but once the system actually works, you can always break it. In my experience, you can break it down to
good usability.
A let's say reduced complexity, so that the property can actually use it, and the people on the property oftentimes, they're actually quite capable, and when you're in that position, you might actually find someone who's had a lot of experience with that, and that's great. But to get to the point where they can actually take it over and use it and not do something and not know whether that's a malfunction or whether that's actually supposed to be that way, because the property people have no idea. They weren't part of the design process, Yeah. So this really all needs to be part of the final setup of the property, and it's a lengthy, iterative process that very rarely, if ever, happens in one shot. Oftentimes the people expect that, okay, fine, now we're all done, get the lighting guy in, let him do his thing, and then, in a couple of hours he's done. Well, it's not like that, and like I said, we try to make it a point. Does it help? No. Because at the end of the day, like I said, you will be the last guy running around and being in people's way because they're doing operational training, or there might even be already friends and family guests, or what have you. So all of those things are a challenge, and I've been doing this for many, 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 many years now, in many different locations, and it's nowhere does it work well, but I have not seen it fail in quite the same way that I have here anywhere else in the world. And I think that is a function of a lot of people technically thinking they know how to put the best possible system together without understanding the purpose of the system is, and I find it incredibly difficult in this environment oftentimes to have these conversations, because people are very attached or proud to their particular set of knowledge that they've accumulated in a particular way, and contractors are have a very particular way of looking at their responsibilities and what it is that they have to deliver versus what would constitute sort of an extra charge or extra service or whatever the case might be. So because we've learned this over time in this particular market, this is why we go in the beginning and try to really account for this extra time that these people need to spend. And oftentimes what we hear, this is also an unfortunate truth, but it is a truth, is that the contractors will say, well, look, our people are going to be available from, 8 a.m. to 4. The hotel operates 24 hours. I cannot, dim for a night scene at 4 p.m.
In winter, you can.
No.
In Berlin, you can start at 2 p.m.
Yeah. So, but no, it's not possible, So, and so already there is very difficult, extra allowances have to be made. And, these people are like, well, we're not going to have the people available for this, because all of our people live 50 miles away and they have to drive there. And of course, blah, 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 So, and it's these types of things that where you really see, it sounds irrational, but really see some of these projects fall apart because of these things. And that's something I still, for me, with the experience we've had, prior to working in Germany, is, to me, that's mind-boggling. Like, I don't get it. I really don't get it. And I don't understand. I refuse to accept that. So and oftentimes, that becomes a quite interesting discussion. But it's a necessity. It must be done. It must be available. So you cannot, for example, also on the subject of control systems and dimming and so forth, you cannot go through these sites, for example, without having an electrician available. It's not possible, because you might run into some technical problem, and that needs to be solved. And if you don't solve it, you cannot complete what you're there to complete. Yeah, but the electrician was not available. We couldn't schedule him. Why? Like, how is that
then
possible?
Find someone who can.
Exactly. Yeah. Go and find someone, and get these people in here because they have a contract with you, right? But that's a reality here. And oftentimes, I do think that a lot of the things where I said in the beginning, you walk into these properties and they're spanking brand new properties, and everything is beautiful but you look at the light or everything could be beautiful, but the way it's lit, it's just a complete shambles. Everything is super flat and whatever materials they selected and chose don't come out at all. They're just being washed out. And so you look and you think, well, what happened? And then you remember and you say, well, I think some of that has to do with the fact that at some point the electricians or somebody just decided, you know what, we just don't, I don't have the time to deal with this. So let me just do this. Right? And some owner, obviously, I mean, you can't expect the owners oftentimes to have that particular experience, or to have the knowledge about these things. And oftentimes, obviously, they will, and now we're back to the very beginning of what we spoke about, they will look at this from a cost perspective. And if somebody comes along and says, oh, look, the designer wants this thing, is very fancy, costs 150 euros per fixture, I can get you the same thing for like 10 euros. Well, owner, takes 2 pictures, looks at it and basically says, you know what? Yeah, it looks exactly the same. Let's go with that.
Can't be the same.
Yeah, no, I mean, whatever, but you just and then of course it doesn't get back to you in oftentimes, sometimes it does, oftentimes it doesn't, until they've actually installed it, because I don't rummage around in the electrical contractor's, sort of a closet there to see what kind of fixtures he's actually going to install. So, then you end up with these things, right? And then you see and you turn them on and you're like, that doesn't...
No.
No. But at that point, it's too late. And nobody is going to rip out the entire ceiling again, to change out all those fixtures, because opening day is tomorrow. And once the property is open, we're not going to do that anymore, because now we got to make the money back that we invested, which is all understandable, But it's just that particular moment where sometimes people really just don't pay attention. I mean, it's not fully understood what the decisions that are oftentimes being made at that level actually will entail at a later point. And, it used to be a little bit different when the technology was more forgiving, right? So when you had lighting systems that were based on, halogen lamps or interchangeable light sources to begin with, so it was very easy. You went and you were able to change out a light bulb, quote unquote, right? And you say, well, this doesn't do what I needed to do. So you come with your different halogen lamp and, you put it in and it has a different beam spread and, blah. And color wasn't a problem anyway, because, everything had a CRI of, 95 plus because of halogen, right? And, so those were great times for lighting people, because you had a lot of flexibility from a fixture perspective, oftentimes, very low cost, because these things, did a lot of different things, or were able to do a lot of different things. And you still had flexibility. Today, that's all very different, because you have very dedicated sources, right? Everything is LED and must be LED, right? So, but the LED light sources are not particularly flexible. Today you get them in, whatever, dynamic white, or, there's all kinds of names for basically a light source that is able to...
Yeah, but still working with it is totally different than it was.
Right, to transition between different, light sources or color temperatures. Yeah. And that's great. But as with all flexibility that's built into these things, somebody is going to start playing around with it at some point, and then you lose, oftentimes, in reality, you lose the composition at the end of the day, because somebody decided, what, also looks good if it's a little bit cooler, but, well, he didn't happen to turn around and look behind him where everything is not the same color temperature, Yeah. So you end up having this hodgepodge of things. So, but anyway, so that's a technological development that actually has put more pressure on the design side of these systems, because you need to be that much more specific about what type of light source and light fixture by which manufacturer oftentimes you will actually need to use in a particular application. And if that gets changed for whatever reason, at a later point, it will have ramifications. And again, those ramifications oftentimes within the process of a project are not fully understood at the given moment. And later, it turns out people have forgotten about it or whatever the case might be. And when you discover what the problem actually is, the cost of resolving the problem oftentimes is astronomical, because you need to start changing furniture. You need to like break open things to find drivers or transformers or whatever. You need to, change out light fixtures. Like one will have, you need a hole that's like 40 mil, but that they've installed. But now the fixture that you can actually get now has 30 mil. So now what are you going to do? You have a hole that's too big. You need to change a piece of furniture. Or you need to, cut new holes in the ceiling. And often, let's say you have an acoustic ceiling or something like that, it's not possible. So the workarounds that you need to find, plus you have a running operation by that time, that makes money. So every time you need to shut something down, it's going to cost you money, right? So the costs that are accumulating to save this stuff or rectify it later oftentimes are prohibitive. So what happens? The thing doesn't get changed. And everybody just gets used to the fact that, could have been better. Unfortunately, it's not. Let's push it off to 10 years from now, do the next renovation. So it's frustrating oftentimes.
Yeah, I think we're kind of at the end of our tunnel in the middle of the light.
Of course, it's
Ronald.
very inspiring.
Yeah,
listening to you.
But the learning is not should have, could have. Pay attention, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, pay attention. Absolutely. Pay attention, hire good people. And, again, there's a reason why certain things have a different price tag than other. That's also a fact. And try to understand fully why something is there.
And ask.
If you don't understand, ask. Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll be back for another episode.
Please.
For
anytime.
sure.
We will.
Perhaps in one of these small hotels.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the countryside.
Let's see. If we find
really
one.
like the idea.
Absolutely. Yeah, if we find
That'd be really nice.
That'd be a great thing. Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's do this.
Real gems out there, man.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
A lot of potentials.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you guys. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely.
Bye.
Bye.